Okay, Bill, so let's take a look at just what you mean by writing fast. And we'll start off with the biggest obstacle. And who is that?
Well, the biggest obstacle is the author themselves because that's the only thing standing between you and writing is you. No one else, no one's saying to you you can't write, no one's saying you shouldn't write, so the author tends to put up all these roadblocks for herself or himself, and that's what's causing you problems.
Exactly. And I know I had feelings of inadequacy myself, and a lot of people experience that because of who taught us to write in the first place.
Yeah, this is saying something pretty strong, and I understand that, but folks, you were taught to write by poor people. I mean, I'm not saying anything bad about teachers, but listen, teachers are not wealthy people. And if you're writing for money in particular, if you want to make money, you got to say to yourself, okay, who should I emulate? Should I emulate a teacher who has never made money writing, or should I emulate authors who, for whatever reason, were brave enough to start writing and said, I don't care, I'm going to let the market decide, not the teachers. Now, I went to Diane, I went to a Catholic grade school. I still remember Sister Mary Nicotine of the Holy Smokes, the nun that taught me to write. She was a wonderful person. She really was. And she taught me a lot about grammar and that sort of thing. And I use that to this day. But it's the people who have made money as authors are the people I try to emulate now.
It's so true. And just to put in my 2 cents on that one, boy, I specifically went into science because I had an English teacher grade my creative writing, and I just didn't know how that was possible. But at any rate, I think the biggest thing is to get some help and not get a lot of hassle from somebody.
Yeah, because we're used to writing something and submitting it for grading, and that's what kills people. They're so worried about getting graded instead of worried about the fact that people just want this information. They want the story. They want to enjoy your writing, and they're not worried about the sentence structure if it works for them.
And so the biggest thing is to get started. And if you don't get started after this, then shame on you. Okay, so let's talk about some fast writing tips. And I think one of the first ones, though, is a big one. I know for me it was to know the intended market and write for them, not necessarily for yourself. So can you speak some more to that, Bill?
Yeah, here's the thing. You want to be writing for the people who are going to read these books, the people that you want these books for. And you got to have that person clearly in your mind. Diane and I were doing a webinar one time, and we were talking to somebody who was writing something about healthcare. I forget exactly what it was. And she was saying, well, there's a lot of sick people out there that really need this book. And I looked at Diane and I said, Diane, I don't know that it's sick people that buy books. I think it's hypochondriacs that buy books.
So true. It's a big difference.
So think about who you're writing the book for. And think about who buys books, and that's what you're thinking about here, and you write for them. And once you learn to let go of some of that, it's really fun to write because you have this image in your mind of the person you're writing for.
Exactly, and so and we'll get into that some more when we talk about really targeting your market. But in terms of some other tips, this one was a big help for me too. Was to really separate structure and writing.
Yeah, you want the book to be set out. In other words, you want to know what the book's going to look like. And are we on the nonfiction?
No, well, we're going to get into some more detail.
We're still
some
okay.
Fast
yeah,
tips.
So you want to have the structure of your book. You want to know kind of where it's going, and then you start writing because otherwise you get lost.
Yeah, at least an outline. And I mean, I can't tell you because I do a lot of editing as well as writing myself, and too often it comes in with absolutely no structure whatsoever. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that means for both nonfiction and fiction.
Yeah,
I think writing in bursts, that really is a big help too.
Oh yeah, some of the authors I work with say I want to write 10 pages a day or whatever. Well, write when you're ready to write. Just write and write in bursts. If you have 5 minutes to write and you're inspired to do it, sit down and write for 5 minutes.
Yeah. So I think sometimes a little bit of discipline can help, but it can also get in your way. So be aware of that.
Well, I live in Ocean City, New Jersey, and I like to run on the boardwalk. I like to jog on the boardwalk. I no longer run. I jog on the boardwalk at a very slow pace. But I keep a recorder with me. And if I come up with ideas, or even sometimes I have of course, my phone with me all the time, I'll call my home number if I know no one's there. And when the recording picks up, I'll dictate some ideas into my recording there. Anytime you can get a burst of writing, just do it.
Exactly. And I think that's, to your point, write without hands. I mean, have something with you to record your thoughts. I mean, I get my best ideas when I'm driving or something where it's really tough to write.
Yeah, and Diane and I do a thing where we actually record interviews we have with people, and then we have them transcribed.
Mm-hmm.
And now you've got a whole lot of stuff, and it's a lot easier to edit stuff than it is to write it from scratch.
It is. So, and we'll talk some more about some of those tips. And I think this goes along with what we've been talking about. A lot of people say, oh, I've got to do all this research. You know, that's just another excuse to not get started, you know. So.
If your first book is going to be so much research that it's going to kill you to do it, write a simpler book to get started
Right.
with. Get a book out.
Right.
That's important. If you want to write the great research novel or the great research nonfiction book later on, that's fine. But here's another tip, Diane. When you're writing a book that requires something with research, just draw a line there, or type in a series of underlines there that says, there were blank number of Americans last year who ate goldfish, or whatever you're writing about. I mean, I'm not sure that's a big market for people eating goldfish, but whatever it is, in other words, just write a blank there and then make a big check mark on the page, but I always put a bunch of plus signs on the page so I can go back to the manuscript and find them. Actually, I don't do that anymore. I pay people to do it, to go through my manuscript and find out where I was missing something, and then they go look it up for me. Because here's what happens. If you go out on the internet to start looking something up while you're writing, you're going to get stuck out there in Google land, and you'll never get back.
Yeah, it's so true. So it's just get it down and trust yourself. You know a lot more than you think you do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I found that out. It was like, whoa, I've solved a lot of problems in my life. And we'll talk about that, especially for the nonfiction tips. But lastly, in terms of some general fast writing tips, is think about writing a series of books, I think, instead of putting it all into one book.
That's right. Yeah, don't try to cram it all in. Relax. Pull a chapter out later on and make a whole other book out of it.
There you go. So let's talk a little bit about some specifics, and we'll start with fiction. For those of you that want to write fiction fast, I think this is an incredible little tip, is to tell them a story. It sounds simple, but...
Four most important words an author can ever keep in mind is tell them a story. You're not writing a phone book if you're writing fiction, with facts and figures. You're writing a fiction story. You're telling them a story. And folks, let's face it, Diane, what are there, 5 to 7 plot lines?
Oh, maybe, yeah.
No,
variations on a thing.
Yeah, I mean, boy meets girl meets boy meets girl, boy meets boy. Boy kills one girl, then finds the adventure. A rock is rolling down a hill, and we can't get out of the way. These are the only stories. There's plot lines, and you think of all the great movies that you went to last year. That they were all variations on the same plot line.
Yeah.
There's romances.
There are comedies, there's dramas, there's adventure.
Those are the plot lines. And guess what? These are the things that people keep coming back to again and again. And we run across people that say, oh, I don't want to write the same thing as everybody else has written. Well,
I would.
I want to write exactly what other people have written if what they wrote sold.
Exactly. So use a winning formula instead of trying to find something that hasn't been invented yet. You don't want to do that. It's like, as Bill said, go with what's already working out there, and you put your very special, unique spin on it, and it works. Though I love this story, and this came from your daughter, I believe, which is a little tip for writing fiction, which is peel the onion.
Peel the onion. This is my daughter Kathleen, who is really a gifted writer, as is my daughter Amanda. But Kathleen came up with this. She says, what I like to do when I'm creating a story is I create an image, and then I start peeling the onion back, and I tell the story backwards from that image. So she told a story. She did a writing one time of 2 parents looking at a little girl lying asleep in bed, and she peeled back, and she told this whole story of how they got to that point and what it meant. She told another great story of a ballerina standing on a darkened stage holding a shoe in her hand, and the whole story was this was the diva who had injured herself, and she was watching the people cleaning up the theater, and it turned out there was another woman who was carrying a bunch of uniforms, who was the diva before her, and said, tomorrow night you got to help me with this. And the new diva, who was the understudy who had stepped in, was walking out the back door with her friends going out to celebrate. So she just peeled these layers of the onion back, and it's a great way to write fiction.
Really terrific. So there are your fast fiction tips, and let's take a look at some fast nonfiction tips. And this first one I have used, I'm telling you, not only for writing books, but for workshops and everything else. It's the 1 through 10 technique. I love this technique.
You write down the numbers 1 through 10, right, Diane?
Yep,
on a piece of paper, down the paper. Next to 1, what do you write?
Introduction.
And what do you write next to number 10?
Summary or close.
And then you only have to think of 8 things you have to say there.
And those are your chapters, done, boom, you've got your structure, which is the next tip, is structure first and then content. So I'm telling you, that 1 through 10 technique works amazingly well. And in fact, if you give yourself 60 seconds to do 1 through 10, I've used whatever I've come up with in 60 seconds more times than I can tell you. Don't take a long time to figure it out. Just do it.
Folks, how do you think I wrote this book? I did 1 through 10.
And again, remember that shorter is so much faster than never. That's why, especially these days, I think if you think of people's attention spans and everything else, you're suggesting here 125 pages. I fully agree. I mean, that's why a lot of compilations, quite honestly, are popular these days, because people like to pick things up, get a pearl, and put it down.
Yeah, I write books on how to write fast. I mean, the last thing I want to do is write a long book on how to write fast.
Right? So keep that in mind, is that you can accomplish an awful lot, and people will buy.
Yeah, and the books that I sell around the world, my customers know that I've sold 2.3 million books. I don't have 2.3 million customers. I have maybe 400,000 customers that keep buying my books again and again. And they're looking for a certain formula that I write in. I write 125 to 140 page books. That's it.
And they sell, obviously.
And I use lots of headings, lots of subheadings. There's a lot of white space in my books. My customers love it.
Pictures, exactly. So we'll talk some more about that too. The other technique that I know you talked about when you wrote Overcoming Time Poverty was that idea of listening to what's going on around you, making notes, and then writing.
Yeah, I get a lot of the titles and a lot of the inspiration for the books just by hearing people speak or whatever. They'll say something. And I'll just think, but that'll be a good book. And then I write it down someplace, and eventually I get back to doing it. But that's how I come up with my book, Overcoming Time Poverty, which sold all over the world. I've been to China and different parts of Asia to speak on that book. I'm published in Europe on that, and in India. It's amazing. I'll tell you a funny, quick thing there. My daughter's computer broke, and we had to call the computer company. Of course, it was picked up by somebody in India. And I'm talking to the guy, and he says to me, "Are you the Dr. Quain that writes books?" And this was a person who had read my books in India.
Amazing. That's really cool. And I know myself, I mean, I get ideas from billboards, from, as you said, people making a comment in line, so it can come from everywhere. So just really be attuned once you're writing to the fact that you don't have to come up with all the ideas yourself. The ideas can flood in from all kinds of places.
Diane, people say to me, do you mind if I use some stuff from your book? I say, hey, it was used when I got it. Help yourself.
Help yourself. So, now, Bill, you already mentioned this, but the whole idea of using headings and subheadings, I always think about this as you want to take people on a journey through your book, and I think they like to know where they are along the journey, which is why headings and subheadings can give them a feel for, where they are, and where you're going.
Some people actually read my books. The first time they read it through, they just go through the headings and subheadings. You just read through every one of them, and some of the little tricks I put in the book too, like the call-outs and that sort of thing. And they love it. And then they go back and they pick out the places and that, by the way, folks, that's how people are reading today. They're going to the table of contents, they're finding a chapter or a subheading they want to go to, and they go right there. So don't write your book thinking, oh, they're going to read every word of it. I don't care if they read every word of it. I only care if they buy every word of it.
Exactly.
And they can't buy one word. They got to buy them all.
Yeah, right. Buy the whole darn book. Right? So, and then also, developing a formula, I think, can really help. So do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Well, people know my formula. My formula is I'm going to stir the pain. This is for nonfiction. I'm going to stir the pain right in the beginning. And I'm gonna spend the rest of the time alleviating that pain and giving them a summary that really sets them on their way and gives them some go-to kinds of things to do.
Exactly. So again, people will pay money to have their problem solved. So you always want to be speaking to the problem. So stirring that pain so they really know they've got that problem, and then, as Bill said, you're going to speak to the solution to that problem. So those are your fast nonfiction tips. And just to finish out our Write Fast section here, we're going to talk a little bit about Fast Pencil and how it can help you write fast.
Yeah, this is the on-demand publisher that we use. There are other ones out there, and they're also good. We kind of like Fast Pencil because it gives you an online writing tool. Also enables you to create a community, like a Facebook community, around your book, where you can get people at different levels to come in and make edits for you if you want to give them that kind of permission, or simply suggestions, that sort of thing. So we like using Fast Pencil to write fast.
Yeah, you can organize your chapters. You can write them. You can write them first, and then you can switch the order around really easily. And as Bill said, the collaboration is really a benefit. The possibilities there. So those are your fast writing tips. So we'll be coming back to talk about fast publishing and
Write fast. Get going.
you got it.